So, hi everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Information Management and AI, the good, the bad, and the mildly unattractive.
Today, we're just so thrilled to have you join us to talk about information management and AI. Certainly something that everybody is wanting to talk about today. So we thought we'd do a bit of a dive into, the good of AI, the bad of AI, but also let's not go with ugly. Let's not typecast AI like that. Let's go with the mildly unattractive. So we're going to work through some different definitions and scenarios and things like that for you today.
So obviously, Teresa introduced us already, but for those that don't know us, my name is Bruce Berends. I'm based in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. And obviously, for those that have been following on LinkedIn, the whole Bob and Jane scenario, I am most definitely not Bob.
And I'm Alyssa. I'm based in Brisbane, in Australia. And even though actually it's not really true to say that I am most definitely not Jane, because actually my middle name is Jane. So I'm at least 50% Jane or 33% Jane. The AIM LinkedIn cartoons were too good not to reference here, definitely.
So really quickly, here is AvePoint. So we are a global organization that is headquartered out of Jersey City, New Jersey. As you can see on the screen, we have a plethora of countries and continents that we work across, and obviously over 9 million cloud users across all of our platforms. We have a multiple Partner of the Year award winner with Microsoft and are also NASDAQ listed. So we are a public organization. Alyssa, do you want to tell everyone about today's challenge?
Sure. So, because we are talking about AI, we thought we'd do like a little Easter egg hunt through the session today. We actually have used AI to generate some parts of this. So we're going to tell you what they are at the end. But we're also, before we do that, we're also going to ask you to have a guess. If you do think that there's something, or if you think you've already seen something, by all means, like throw it in the chat, throw it out there, things like that. But we just thought it would be fun to have that little Easter egg hunt as we go through the session today, to see if you can tell what we've generated with AI as part of this presentation today. Awesome. Okay. I just wanted to do, Bruce and I ran a webinar about a month ago talking about selling the value of information management and what the business case was essentially for having a really good information management program. So I just wanted to do a 30-second recap on that as we now transition into, let's assume that everybody's on board with the business case for information management in the organization, and let's take it to that next step now of, how are we approaching this new technology that everybody is wanting to talk about, and what are some of the things we need to think about. So we have the situation where we're potentially not managing the life cycle of our content. We've got too much stuff building up around us. That has an impact, a really significant impact on how or whether or not we can have good success using AI tools. So information lifecycle plays a really critical role here as well. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through. But just wanted to sing back. See, I'm really going with the musical theme today. I really wanted to hark back to the webinar that we did previously, because value and then looking at these emerging or new technologies is really important. So we want to come back to, when we're thinking about how we're doing things and what we're implementing and things like that, we need to come back to, are we maintaining the integrity of our information? Are we achieving efficiency? And how can we achieve cost savings as well? So even as we're looking at these new technologies, we still need to be coming back to, what is the value here? How is it that we're doing it? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about these things as we go through that. So the other thing that I wanted to do just before we start to get into it was really look at a document generation history sort of timeline. And I'm going to go back in time, not to my own personal experience, but not far off, where essentially when we're talking about information creation and content creation, we're really talking about the very first history of man, really. So we're talking about recording history has really essentially always been part of life. And what is information management if it's not recording, if it's not recording history or what's being done? So we're talking about paintings, rocks carving, hieroglyphics, things like that. We've been generating content really since we've been able to, scratch a mark on another surface. Of course, the advent of paper, really, for more than a century, probably a little bit more than that now, was the main form of document generation. But even if we start to move to that more electronic space, and we're really only talking, I guess, sort of as a mainstream, we're talking like 80s, 90s kind of thing here. The advent of digital or electronic content still followed paper processes. So if you think about a file share, we're still talking about, we put a document into a folder, we put a folder with, we divide that up into, different subfolders and things like that. So we took these paper-based processes and we just transitioned them to an electronic world. The advent of Microsoft Office really was the democratization of applications, which put the power into the hands of the user rather than, and I really am showing my age here, rather than having, say, like a typing pool or something like that, where, document generation would potentially happen in the actual, physical generation of it would happen in a different area to the person who was the author of the document. People were now able to generate their own content really sort of quickly and easily. We've got things like, mail merge and document assembly and things like that have started to lead us to this point of when we're now talking about sort of generative AI. And we're going to talk about both process and generative AI today, where essentially ask a question, get a document kind of thing. You can say to ChatGPT or Bing Chat or, Copilot with Microsoft coming out, things like that, write me a 500-word blog on the value of information management. Boom, there's content generation kind of thing. So I think documents as a medium is potentially fading. Or are we, we're starting to see the very traditional way that we've done things for more than a century now really start to change, because content is just everywhere, which presents obviously us as information content managers a real issue. How are we going to deal with this really extreme evolution of content generation? So I think it's interesting just to have a look back and sort of see where we've come from and where we're going.
Cool. So talking about generative AI and how it's the future and how it's changed document generation forever, supposedly. So we've got just a couple of examples of what's currently out there and available at the moment. So from a Microsoft 365 perspective, you've got Copilot, which, in case you've been living under a rock, Microsoft has been advertising to no end recently. It's all around having generative AI within the Office applications and within the Microsoft toolset of M365 to help you with generating content and generating documents in a much easier and more concise way. ChatGPT, although AI has been around somewhat in some ways since the 50s, ChatGPT was kind of the first, I suppose, I'll use a marketable product around generative AI that kind of got people excited as to what was possible and how it fits together. I think we're at GPT version 4 at the moment, so there's still updates that happen around that. But again, a lot of the Microsoft technologies is underpinned by what the ChatGPT technologies are because of the investment that Microsoft has in ChatGPT. And for those of you that are using Internet Explorer as your browser, you'll probably notice that Bing now there's a Bing chat icon now it's a Copilot icon. I think they changed it a couple of days ago. You can start to use that from a searching perspective from within your browser as well. So you can click on that little icon, it will pop up a window. If you're lucky enough to have an organization that has got Bing Chat Enterprise, it will also look at the content within your organization as part of generating answers and responses as well. So yeah, so those are the key ones that are out there at the moment. Do you want to tell us about 7-year-old and cleaning your room?
So some of you might have heard me tell stories about my extremely gorgeous daughter Lulu, who is a spunky little kid with a big personality. Definitely, I have no idea where she gets that from. It must be her father.
No idea.
But yeah, she has potentially taken the award for the world's messiest room, where I would say that even with professional help, we're still looking at like a week of work in there to get that room sorted. Not too long ago, I sent her into her room to go and clean it up. It was a Saturday morning or something like that. And I was like, right, I've had enough of walking past and seeing this just dreadful mess. Get in there and clean that room. So about 10 minutes later, I'm in the kitchen, doing some stuff, and I look around and there's Lulu, not in her room cleaning like she's supposed to be. She's sitting on the couch, flicking through the iPad. And I kind of looked over at her because I was like, there was no way that room could possibly have been cleaned in 10 minutes. And I look over at her and I say, Lulu, how's that room cleaning going? And she looks up at me, she side-eyes me. She's the best side-eye you've ever seen. She side-eyes me and says, look, I've got to be honest, it's not great. And that was it. But what I realized with her was that the room had got so messy, it was just overwhelming for her, and she didn't know where to start with this. So what I needed to do was go in there with her and say, okay, let's just get the shoes away into the cupboard. Now we've got the shoes away, let's concentrate on the books. And now we've got the books away, let's do the clothes, or let's do the Barbies, or whatever the next mountain was to tackle. And what we need to do, I found that this was a really good analogy for approaching this somewhat insurmountable challenge, is to really break it down, like the same way that I needed to break down into pieces for her. When we're approaching this whole new thing, this whole new area of technology, it can feel overwhelming, it can feel too challenging, but what we just need to do is break it down into, okay, what am I going to start with? What am I going to do next? What's the next thing after that? Because these things can be overwhelming. So the one thing I will say about having Lulu is it's definitely a learning opportunity for me, for sure. She challenges me at every step in the best possible way, but it is exactly the same in how sometimes I have to approach these kind of tasks that can feel like, I'm never going to be able to get through all of this, which is just to break it down step by step, one by one, and go through it from there.
Cool. As a father of 2 daughters, I'm always happy for advice on how to get kids to clean their room. So yes, if anyone has any
anyone's
advice,
got
please
good
put it in the
ideas,
chat.
yeah, put it in the chat. We need to know. We're desperate.
All right, so where do we start? Alyssa, did you want to talk about the differences between generative and process AI?
Yeah, we're gonna talk about the two kind of main types of AI. There's lots and lots of different subcategories in all of this, but we're gonna break it down into basically generative AI and process-based AI. So if we keep moving on from there, the two things are different, but kind of like a dog and a cat. We're going to talk about dogs and cats. a little bit later as well, these things can actually coexist. So we can have generative AI and process-based AI working together, and we can think about how that, what is the need that best suits the outcome. So I'm going to talk a lot about outcomes, always talking about outcomes, and that is, what is it that we need to achieve, and then what is the best way of getting there. So that we're going to start by breaking down process-based AI, because I think that this is potentially one that we as information managers can get the most benefit from. So we'll start by talking about process-based AI, and then we'll have a look at generative AI after that.
Cool. So process AI is the term that's used to, I suppose, refers to the AI usage around automation, optimization, and improvement of business processes and or tasks that involve the data, information, and knowledge that you have. So we're talking about things like robotic process automation, intelligent process automation, and business process management. So all the type of stuff that you would get with your workflows, Power Automate flows, those types of things that you may already have in your environment, using AI to help enhance those and make them work better. In terms of what it means for information management now and the future, AI it's all about the 5 key points you see on the screen there. So efficient data handling. So AI will be able to automate, or can automate, data extraction, classification, organization, and therefore reduce that manual effort and improve efficiency within your organization. The enhanced search and retrieval. So essentially, search engines are context aware, right? So they can provide results that simplify the information retrieval for users, and therefore help you get what you need in a much quicker way, so you can get your job done in a faster way. Because I think there's a figure that we talk about commonly, which is about 47% of workers can't find the information that they need to do their job, so they go about recreating it. So that is a real important one that often gets overlooked, unfortunately. Improved data quality. So it's interesting because I've been reading some of the chat, and I saw Jed's comment around, I do my own research, and that, we need to validate it by giving it long prompts. I tend to agree with what he has there. However, it does have the ability to detect errors, duplications, and help with data accuracy, which can lead to a higher quality of information. So, once you've gone and created, so you're creating using Alyssa's example before, you're creating a blog around a particular subject, you can use AI to generate that whole outline to start with. Then you go and populate it, do your own writing, then you can feed it back in and say, hey, can you verify the facts that are in here to make sure that they're right, or get some more information on particular subjects and things like that. So it doesn't just need to be used from a creation perspective. It can be used from an update perspective and an ongoing, I suppose, validation to some extent of your own work. From a cost-saving perspective, obviously, automation leads to efficiency gains, which then leads to a reduction in operational costs around information management. So can definitely help out there. And then the ultimate is obviously better decisions. So AI-driven analytics can help uncover patterns and insights that you may not have actually noticed or seen in your organization, because the sheer volume of data that you had to work with was not something that you could easily analyze and get hold of. So it can enable or aid in the decision-making process and knowledge discovery.
So that's the good, and that is all good, definitely. But there's some bad, and there's some mildly unattractive as well, as we're going to work through this. What we do want to stop and think about is, and this is one of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about what our outcomes are, and making sure that we're using an appropriate tool for the job that we're doing, and that's automation versus AI. So these are really different things. AI isn't or automation isn't necessarily AI, and shouldn't be confused as such. So I wanted to give you just a really quick example, and this is a quick example mainly for Bruce's sake, because he's sick and tired of me talking about this, because this is a really incredible failure of government administration that's happened in Australia in the last few years, that I think has so many lessons for information managers, that I think it's worth I definitely think it's worth having a look into. And this is a scheme that was dubbed by the media as robo-debt, which is essentially a way of determining whether or not welfare recipients had been overpaid by the welfare system, and then needed to have a debt raised against them. The government at the time certainly made it sound like they were using, the latest in sort of cutting edge technology to calculate this information. But actually, essentially, all they were doing was using some very, very simple formulas to do some income averaging over a 12-month period, and then figure out if there was a debt after that. Now, because there was automation in this case, there was absolutely no intelligence involved in this. There were issues, for example, that the system that they'd put in place couldn't read unstructured content. So in one example, a welfare recipient would upload a separation certificate. So a certificate that basically just says, your job no longer exists. And so you don't have a job, which meant that they could then claim unemployment benefits in Australia. So they would upload that separation certificate, but the system in place couldn't read that a separation certificate had been provided because it couldn't read any unstructured data. It was simply working on process automation, not on any kind of intelligence. So what the system would then do is, because it didn't recognize that this separation certificate had been uploaded and couldn't read the output of that, it would then raise a debt and say to the person, well, you've clearly been overpaid, and so now you owe us $12,000 or $15,000 or things like that. Now, this didn't just happen to one or two people in Australia. This happened to hundreds of thousands of people in Australia, because without any intelligence designed in that system, or ability to be able to read documents that were being provided by welfare recipients and things like that, the entire scheme was a massive failure, which actually turns out had no legal basis to operate at all. So when we are talking about automating processes or using AI for process and things like that, we really have to be careful not to confuse automation with AI. And we have to be really careful to think about what is the outcome we're trying to achieve, and what is the best tool to use to be able to do that. Now, there is nothing wrong with automation. I am pro automation. What I am very against is not thinking through the outcome that we need to achieve. So I think a lot of the times we kind of get this a little bit backwards, where we go through and say, oh, well, the first step I need to do this, the second step I need to do this, the third step I need to do this, and then I'll get to an outcome. I actually think we need to flip that, and we need to say, here is the outcome that I need to get to. Now let me figure out the best path to get to that outcome. Maybe that's automation. Maybe it's using AI, maybe it's doing something completely different. But if we flip the way we think about it and start thinking about, well, this is the outcome that I need to achieve, as opposed to I'm going to take this step, and then I'll get to some kind of outcome, we often end up with a much better results and a much better scenario. And I think if you do a little bit of, even just basic Googling on robo-debt, actually I can post a link to an article. I did an interview with a journalist just recently about this. Not only that, I think it's such an interesting case study for information managers to consider, particularly when we're talking about the role that information management plays in public services and things like that. So I'll dig that up, and I'll see if I can pop a link to that in the chat for everyone. Sorry, Bruce, that was my 5 minutes on robo-debt, and now I'll.
I thought the rest of the webinar was just going to be over.
Seriously, if somebody would let me, that I would run a webinar on robo-debt in about 3.5 seconds. Except it would be a 5-hour webinar, and I don't think anybody would be quite into that. So
maybe you should tell the good people how many hours of footage you watched.
So okay, so there was in Australia when the government wants to investigate something in a in a really significant way, they have what's called a royal commission, and so I followed this really closely because I did think that there was a number of learnings that could be made out of this. So I watched 46 days of testimony about robo-debt. It was all live streamed on YouTube. So I watched 46 days of testimony. I read a 1,000-page report on it, and then obviously, like, I then read anything I could possibly get my hands on in the media to learn. So I think like, outside the people who actually worked on the Royal Commission, I could potentially be Australia's leading expert on on robo-debt and its failings, particularly as they relate to information management.
The best part across that was the daily updates that I received.
I know, every day I would message Bruce and I'd be like, do you want a robo-debt update? Do you want to hear what happens now?
Anyway, moving on. So an arsenal of auto classification. So what are some of the ways that we can auto classify content throughout the AI journey that people are obviously undertaking? So auto classification can be done based on location. So what we're talking about here is, I have content that lives in a particular location, whether that be a physical location, or obviously we're talking about digital records here, but in a digital location, anything that goes into that digital location, I want to classify in this particular way because I know that it's grouped together in that location for a reason, and this is why it fits in. From the next one is a metadata perspective. So, metadata is important, and we tell everyone all the time how important metadata is. If you've got good metadata, you can also use that as a basis for your automatic classification as well. So, hey, this document was created by this person, and therefore I'm going to classify it this way. Otherwise, I'm going to classify it in another way. And, you can also use a combination of what you're seeing on the screen here as well. So it doesn't just have to be one or the other. From a text analysis standpoint, so this is more delving deeper into the content within the document itself, doing some analysis across it, and using that content that's in there to generate a classification based on the tone, the information that's in there, and the I suppose the predictability of the type of content that's in there. Document fingerprinting looks at multiple different points on a page within a particular document. If you think about it a little bit like search engines in some respects, where Google will rank, search engine of choice will rank based on what it thinks is best, based on over 2,000 points on a page. So it could be how images are presented, the types of keywords that you have, the text that lives in there, the title of the document, who created it, how recent it is, that type of thing. So document fingerprinting is about looking at all those different types of things. And also aligning them with I suppose what's best, and then also classifying content based on that information that it can get out. And then obviously you've got process AI. So process AI is all about, as we mentioned before, that process automation, and using that process automation to help generate content. So one that I can think of as an example is something like an invoice, where you have a particular system where you generate a statement of work of some kind, and then you want to generate an invoice from that statement of work, and that can be automated based on a standard template and how that process fits together, and it could also pre-populate that content with generated information that we could retrieve from different AI sources potentially as well. Cool. Alyssa.
I think it's also important to remember on this that, we're talking about classification here, because that, is a primary focus for information managers. But, AI can be used for, pulling stuff out of documents. It can, it certainly can be used for classification from a security perspective, from a retention perspective, things like that. So there's lots and lots of different things. So again, if we think about what is the outcome that I need to get to, we can then go back and look at, okay, well, what is the best way? Can I use, just a location-based thing, or a simple metadata kind of classification, or things like that? Or do I need something that's actually going to pull metadata, pull stuff out of a document and populate it as metadata? So there's lots of different lots of different things. But in its absolute most simplistic form, what we're talking about is labeling things in some way, whatever that might look like, using examples. So I've got a really quick example here that I did with my phone. Probably many of you have done very similar things. This is my mum. For those of you who are going to comment, oh, you look just like your mum. Yes, I've heard it for my entire life. Spoiler, we sound exactly the same as well. But what I was able to do on my phone was go through, select some photos of my mum and say, this is my mum, Robin. What the AI was then able to do was go and label all of my photos that had my mum in them using the examples that I'd given it. So in this particular instance, I could give it some positive examples. On another one that I did, my son looks really, really similar to one of his cousins. So I had to also do some negative examples. So I had to say, no, that is not my son. That's his cousin. But in this instance, I gave it some positive samples and said, yep, go and tag all of these. And then what I'm able to do is when I do a search on my phone where I'm looking for photos of my mum, it's going to pull all of those up for me so that I don't now have to scroll through thousands and thousands of photos that are on my phone. I can quickly and easily just say, show me all the photos that I have of my mum or of Robin on my phone, and then they're going to be produced really, really quickly and really easily. Bruce likes to tease me about this particular screenshot because my phone was on 93%, which is potentially the lowest it's ever been, because I live in constant fear of my phone falling below 90% on charge. Definitely. I don't know if people are like, take it all the way down to 1%, but I'm a person who starts hyperventilating if it hits about 47. So that's Bruce's favorite thing about the AI program that I used on my phone was just the standard. I have an iPhone, and I just used whatever came with the Photos app on my iPhone, but it allows me to go through, select a number of photos of the person that I'm looking for, and then it essentially is tagging it with metadata so that I can find it again much easier, for sure. The photo actually that I had of my daughter earlier in the thing, oh no, I'm giving away one of the examples here, but the photo, I used AI to find that photo of my daughter when I had to go through and say, find me a photo of Lulu. I was able to go onto my phone, just type in Lulu, and it gave me a selection of photos that I could go to. So if nothing else, if people haven't learned anything else, we've got you tagging your photos on your phone. So that's amazing.
For those that use Android, the Photos app in Android has similar functionality as well. So you can
there you go.
For the same thing. Cool.
All right. But let's look at now either sort of some of the bad or some of the mildly unattractive, and let's think about some of the warnings kind of thing. And I think there's been, and with any new technology kind of thing, there's this there's a kind of, oh, this is new, exciting, this is fantastic, and then there's reality kind of being like, okay, hang on a minute, let's all calm down about this. So the thing that we need to remember here, and I cannot stress this enough, is that this is not a silver bullet. It is just not. It's like any technology that you're going to use, it is going to only be as good as the effort you put into it. So it doesn't matter how much we think, AI is going to revolutionize everything. We still have to put effort into that to be able to get the outcomes that we need. So cool. Where would we actually consider this? So what would we, particularly when we're talking about process-based AI, where would we consider this? Well, one thing we would say is that there's just too much content, and it's not humanly possible for us to classify all of that or tag it with the appropriate metadata. We can't rely on users. Like, I can't rely on Lulu to clean a room. and can't rely on users to tag content with everything that it needs to be tagged with. We've got a need to automate this because of those reasons. And the area to focus on is content that is easily repeatable, at least initially, is a really good starting place. I'll give you just a really quick example of this. One of the organizations that I work with did a migration pre-COVID, and like moving house, basically they shoved a whole lot of stuff in a box and said, oh, we'll figure that out after we've moved, which something that every single one of us has probably done. What they then discovered was they really needed to find stuff that was in that box, but because the box was so big and haphazardly packed through no fault of their own, it was resource and time issues and things like that. They then had, this intense content store of stuff that they couldn't find anything with. So what they did was they used using our tool, which I'm not going to go into today, but using our tool, they trained to find 14 types of critical documents that they needed to find, and it went through and was able to classify and tag appropriately those 14 types of documents. And then we could do things like move them to the right location and things like that. So, when we're talking about those kinds of scenarios, this is where processed AI is a really good use case.
So what do you need before you start? So you need some sort of scanning process AI solution or software to help work with that. Then you need positive examples. So positive examples are, these are the types of content or the type of content that I need to find, or the types of documents that I need to find. The more you have, in most cases, the more accurate the results that you'll get. This also goes with negative samples. So you want to train the model to distinguish what the difference between what you actually want and what you don't want, okay? Because there may be similar documents. So if we use an example of an invoice, you may have an invoice and a packing slip, or that may be very similar in terms of the content that lives on it, the way it looks, the way it feels. So therefore, you need to train the solution with those positive and negative samples. Then outcomes. So what do you want to do with the content once you've identified it? So do you want to tag it? Do you want to classify it? What's the purpose of what you're doing as part of this process? So if we're working through what that process looks like, data sets need to be interrogated and classification needs to be determined. So you need to identify the workload that you're working with. Then there's those positive and negative samples, which I was talking about before. Keyword identification as part of that, and this is all around the pre-processing and training to build out a model. Once that model is built out, then you can test that model and you can assess it against what you've built with a sample set of documents, and then go through that content classification, I suppose, process to make sure that it is doing what you need. And then, as per any process, there's always an improvement step, which is to review and retrain if need be. So if we take invoices as an example, if you change the format of your invoices, if you change the structure of how they fit together, the content that's available on them, you may need to retrain your classification model over time to help understand that, hey, I've got this new model and you need to start picking up on these documents as well. So how do we classify a dog that looks like a cat? So this is an example of how AI kind of fits together, or the machine learning technology fits together in terms of classifying content. So if we look at things like ear geometry and snout length, cats usually have larger ears or pointier ears, whereas dogs usually have longer snouts. So automatically we've got some sort of determination between or two key points that will help us determine what's a dog and what's a cat. But there are going to be dogs with shorter snouts and also cats with longer snouts and shorter ears and so on and so forth. So what we draw kind of between the 2 points that are closest together, we draw kind of a line between those two, and then we create I suppose a boundary that sits in the middle. Now this boundary is your, I suppose, your unknown boundary. So any content that falls south of the blue line with the dogs is most likely to be a dog. Anything that falls north of the blue line with the cats is most likely to be a cat. Anything that falls in that little range in between, AI and the technology that you're using is going to have a harder job trying to work out. what it is. So that's why usually a lot of AI technologies provide you with a predictability score, where they'll say, hey, I'm really confident that it's a dog, or I'm really confident that it's a cat, or you know what, there's not enough information in this particular image for me to be able to determine whether it's one or the other. However, I'm leaning more towards, I'm 20% sure it's a dog, whereas, you know, I'm not very confident that it's a cat at all. So it is based on statistical models. So large language models, although they can be employed to help with this type of thing, there is a chance that results may come out wrong. And that's what I was talking around, that whole, you know, falls within that little band in the middle. There may be a way that it's not quite giving you the most accurate information, as per the first image where it's actually a dog that looks like a cat. In some cases, though, results may vary and be very incorrect. So there, you've got to really consider the content that you're working with, and provide some sort of level of monitoring and confidence that goes around. So if you're confident that the model is predicting 90% of what's in there, and it's predicting it correctly, then there's only 10% that you've really got to worry about so much. And that's where you can start to implement things like manual review processes, spot checking, stuff like that, to help to ensure that you're getting with what you want. What if both a dog and a cat are in the picture is a great question. Usually the way that it will, well, Alyssa's answered it, so I don't have to. There you go. It'll usually look at what is the most prevalent in the picture in some circumstances, but that is one of the cases where it may have an issue with trying to determine what is the best outcome for you. But most of the time, it will look at the most prevalent thing in the photo.
I would say on that one, it really does depend on what the outcome is. So if you've programmed your AI and you're looking for just identify that there are animals here, then it's going to identify, you know, yep, this is a dog, this is a cat, animals, great, off we go. Are you just looking for cats? Yep, it'll find that, because it, you know, it'll recognize the ear geometry versus, you know, other factors and things like that. If you're just looking for a dog, it's going to do the same thing. Potentially, though, it can also say this is a photo that has both a cat and a dog in it, kind of thing, because it's identified dog and it's identified cat, kind of thing. So again, we're coming back to, well, what is the outcome that you're looking for? It will depend on what it is that you get. But again, like any kind of technology that we want to be successful, it's not going to change bad process. So if we want to be successful with this kind of stuff, we really have to look at what our information management process is. And that, for me, I think, and particularly as we move to just have a quick chat about generative AI, information lifecycle and the management of our information becomes even more important. Because if we're asking questions of information that is outdated or no longer accurate or things like that, then we're not getting good results from that. So we have to look at how can we modernize our approach to this. So spoilers, process AI is only going to work when there's good data to start with. So you're still going to need that AIIM strategy. We're not throwing that out the window at all. In fact, if anything, I would say it has never been more important. So as with any technology, this can produce false positives and it can get it wrong. That can be, you know, limited training model, or, you know, needs better input or things like that. That's fine. And so models may need to be revised or retrained or things like that as information changes, and information will change over a period of time. So we need to consider what that looks like as well. So it is, as I said earlier, it is not a silver bullet. It absolutely depends on the quality of the information that you've got, and is only as good as the outcome that you've defined at the beginning. All right, so let's look at AI for better outcomes. So auto classification AI, great, should always be linked to an outcome, and it's only as good as the effort that you put in. So just 3 things to remember as we go through that. So let's have I'm kind of watching the clock where we're coming up on time. So let's have a really brief look at generative AI and some of the considerations that we as information managers need to make for that.
Cool. So generative AI is all about generating content. So text, images, videos, PowerPoint presentations, all that type of fun stuff. And the way that it creates content is it looks at different patterns and structures and will essentially learn from those patterns and structures and work out what the next logical or the most common predictable step is as part of that whole process. So I think with ChatGPT, I think there's about 90 million neurons that the content goes through as part of it. So if it's trying to predict what the next word in a sentence is, it will use those to calculate what the most common word is that falls after that. And that's how it builds out the information, which can lead to it lying to you. Or if you tell it that it's wrong, it will also lie to you and say that, no, it's right, or yes, I got that wrong, and so on and so forth. So generative AI is the mildly unattractive, contrary to popular belief, it's not me. So with the whole idea around it is good data equals good results. So the better information that you have or that it has access to, the better the results that it can work with. Watermarking is really important in terms of how it can generate that type of content. Privacy and security. So that's a little bit of an interesting one because, as people probably know, there's been several news articles around how does generative AI deal with things like copyright and security and content and stuff like that. A lot of organizations are now putting in privacy policies or security policies or having an AI policy where you're only allowed to use it in particular scenarios, or when you do use it, these are particular settings that you need to have configured and so on and so forth. And then that verification and testing. So I think we already touched on that already, but it's all about, even though it's generating that new content, you still need to verify it. You still need to make sure that the content that it's generated is correct. One of the things that it's not great at is arithmetic. It is getting better, but if you ask it to do simple sums, it can actually struggle, which is quite interesting considering computers were created for the mathematic purposes anyway. But yes, it can struggle with things like that. So those are I suppose the 4 key things when it comes to that. So
can we just go back to, sorry,
yep.
Can we go back to that for just a second? One of the things that I've started to see organizations do, and I think that this is absolute genius, and I really highly recommend it, is to where they are starting to use generative AI in the workplace, is to watermark those documents so that there's some evidence and audit trail of that content having been generated by AI. So they're not kind of head in the sand saying, oh, no one's going to use this and we're not going to do it. And so but they are saying, okay, we know you are going to use it, but we're just going to acknowledge where that has happened by watermarking the documents. And I think that that's a really good practical way that if your organization is starting to look at, we know that people are going to start using generative AI to start to produce content, is to not try and stop that necessarily, but to try and put some controls and boundaries around that. The other thing I would say is maybe leaning more towards the bad than the mildly unattractive, is that, again, if you don't have good information lifecycle in your organization and you're running generative AI over your existing content, like at an enterprise level kind of thing, you are potentially getting outdated and inaccurate results. So if you, let's say, for example, give me a financial, give me some financial data from the, whatever that might be, and it's giving you stuff from 2014 because that's still sitting in your system, then you're not going to get up-to-date and accurate results. So an information and data management strategy in the world of generative AI, I really cannot state this strongly enough, has never been more important. Because if we're wanting to take advantage of these, if we want to take advantage of these tools, then we need that underpinning information and data management strategy to take best advantage of them. So on these ones here, these are just some things to consider as you are considering content generation over a new, in your enterprises and things like that. Then you need to take some of these things into account. Also, you need to think about, is your AI running over, content that could have sensitive information in it and things like that. So that's another, that could be a whole other can of worms there that you don't necessarily want to open. Sorry, Bruce, just wanted to add a couple of things in on that.
That's okay.
To finish up here, and we've got maybe a couple of minutes for some questions. So if you do have any questions, or you have identified where we might have used AI to generate some of this talk that we've done today, please do pop those in the chat. We'll try and get to those as well. But my final thought is, and I say this all the times, but I think it's worth saying again and again and again, is with this stuff, it just start. Don't let the need to be perfect be the enemy of doing something. It's a good idea to start small, test it, try it, learn from it, things like that, and get a good outcome for that. Maybe don't get a good outcome from it, learn from it, and then do better next time. So as Gretchen Rubin said, it's spending 10 minutes to clear off one shelf is better than not doing anything because you couldn't do the whole thing. And AI is a huge thing, whether it be process based or generative based. It's absolutely huge. But just starting with something small and building up over a period of time, then that's a good start, definitely.
Cool. Before we get to what we've used in AI, there are a couple of questions that we can probably address. So Carolyn has said, what if it's legacy data that you're trying to clean up and deal with, it will be outdated. So again, as Alyssa mentioned before, with process AI, it's all about the outcome. So the outcome is that you want to clean up that content, then that legacy data is content that you actually want, so that you can actually potentially use AI to classify that content or to analyze that content and provide you with better insights as to what is that legacy data, how is it being built, what's the main purpose behind it, whether there's any metadata that it can pull out, that type of thing. So there's a lot to it. It's about what the outcome is that you have in there.
And I would say, particularly when we're talking about legacy data, and this goes back to the example I talked about earlier with the organization I'm working with that did that migration, that is a perfect use case for process AI. Absolutely, because process AI, that's going over these huge swathes of content that we would never be able to do manually. But then we need to think about the outcome. Is that legacy data something that we want doing content generation, things like that? So you want to think about what's the best tool for the job, what's the outcome that I need to get to, and then work backwards from there.
Well, there's no responses in there. There's no response in there around what we used to generate.
I know. Well, I told everybody that I used the AI on my phone to find the photo of Lulu. But what else did we use? What else did we do, Bruce?
So our headshots at the start were actually generated from AI. You may tell that my beard is a lot redder than you may see fit than it is now. But,
and my hair has never been that controlled. So they were clear. But we used AI to generate our headshots. These are not headshots that we normally use, but we thought it would be fun to do this for today. And the other thing that we used for AI was all of the definitions. I actually asked AI give me definitions for itself, basically. I don't know if there's some kind of meta thing there. But I also asked it, I wanted references with that as well. So I'm not sure if you'll be able to see those in the slides, but all of the definitions I used were able to be referenced from reputable sources like Gartner and things like that. So and then of course obviously the photos of my mum and the photos of Lulu I managed to get from AI as well. So
I will give it a shout out if anyone's interested in AI generated headshots. We use sector.ai if anyone's interested. And although you do need to provide it with around 30 photos of yourself, it can secta.ai. And if it can create some quite good ones, and there are some photos that have been generated that are definitely usable. Cool. All right. Thank you again for attending. If you wanted to know more about our products and services that we have on offer, then you can go and head over to the AvePoint website, where you can get more information about AvePoint Opus, our next level information lifecycle management product, which uses AI technology in the background. But yes, we thank you for your time. We know that time is precious, so thank you all for attending and for all your questions. It's been great.
Thank you very much. Want to thank Bruce Berends and Alyssa Blackburn from AvePoint, and thank you to AvePoint for underwriting our session today. Without support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs. One last thing that I want to say before we depart off is that, as you may know, the AIM conference it's around the corner. It's less than 6 months away, which sounds like a really far time out, but it's not. It's just around the corner. Go to aimconference.com, get more information about what's coming up, or check us out on social media between now and then with at AIM24, hashtag AIM24, and we'll keep you up to date on all of the latest and greatest. The keynotes are getting scheduled now. The session agenda will be getting up very soon. So it's already shaping up to be a fantastic conference. So again, thank you very much to Alyssa and Bruce from AvePoint, and we will see you all with our next webinar. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
thanks so much.